And that was part of the reason why medical school never even occurred to me at that time. The whole medical school application process is very long. It's arduous. It has a lot of things that if you don't know, if you don't have the inside information, it's hard to navigate.
There's a lot of people who are watching this who don't even know what you mean when you say you matched. What does that mean?
Yes. So in your fourth year of medical school, all medical students have to apply for the match. And that just means you choose a specialty.
Do you think your nursing background helped you match?
Yes. Every single person in every interview I had in residency asked me about my nursing experience. The offers that the residents are getting, the senior residents are getting, are in the $500,000 range per year. But people who partner and are in private practice can make up to $1 million per year.
What is up, guys? Jason here. Welcome back to the channel and our series, Nurses to Riches, The Road to Fire. Today's guest started her career as a nurse, but now she's on her way to making between $500,000 to over $1 million a year as a doctor in radiology. How did she do it? Her story is full of surprises. Why she decided to leave nursing in the first place, how she made it through med school without drowning in debt, and how she got into one of the hardest residencies. She's sharing all the tips, tricks, and challenges that most people won't even talk about. If you've ever wondered how to go from nurse to doctor, and if it's even worth it, you have to watch this video. All right, let us know what your name is and what it is you're currently doing for a living.
So my name is Lily Nguyen, and I'm currently an intern in residency. So residency training is something that happens after medical school, and I'm training to be a diagnostic radiologist. So I'm in my first year of radiology training.
Okay, we're going to talk about this later, but I had a conversation with a radiologist yesterday who graduated from Stanford. He said he's using AI technology in his practice, and he learned Python just so he can learn how to program these programs and software that they're using in their practice. And it's amazing. So we'll talk about that later. But
Absolutely.
You said you're currently interning, right? But the reason I reached out to you is because I know you were a nurse before you started going into medical school. So
yes,
walk me through that process. First of all, why did you even want to become a nurse?
I was a nurse for 5 years prior to medical school, and I was the first in my family to go to college and finish college. So there's nobody in my family who actually did healthcare. So I went into just going back, way back, I went into undergrad to become a graphic designer. But just in the first year of freshman year, I was very pragmatic about what I wanted to do. And I wanted a stable job that was going to give me flexibility and job security, basically. So I took some classes in physiology, really liked them, and thought that nursing would be a really good, flexible, stable job for me. So that's why I went into nursing. The other thing that kind of layered on top of that is the fact that my dad was in and out of the hospital often when I was going through college. And he ended up actually getting a kidney transplant when he was in his early 40s. And this was all during the time where I was in undergrad. So I was there watching the nurses care for him. And I was like, this just seems like such a wonderful, fulfilling, and rewarding career. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up graduating from Northern Arizona University, and I worked in cardiology for 5 years. So that's kind of where my nursing career started.
Wow, that's amazing. So he had a kidney transplant when he was in his 40s. Okay.
Yes.
And you said nobody in your family worked in healthcare at all. And you were the first to
No.
graduate college.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, a lot of times I feel like if you don't know what a path looks like you haven't seen it in your family, a lot of times that can be a big barrier for people. And that was part of the reason why medical school never even occurred to me at that time. I never saw the whole medical school application process is very long. It's arduous. It has a lot of things that if you don't know, if you don't have the inside information, it's hard to navigate. And after I was a nurse for a while, I was exposed to more physicians and what that role looked like. And that was when kind of the seed was planted in my brain. This could be a possibility for me sometime.
And I know, let's talk about your nursing career, and then we're going to get into what it is that you're doing now. So you said you were a nurse in cardiology for 5 years. Why did you choose cardiology?
cardiovascular system is just so fascinating to me. I love the organ system. I love the nursing aspect, the nursing care that is involved with it. Part of it was just exposure. When I was a nursing student, I did a nursing externship at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And I think that's other opportunities that like maybe nursing students don't know about is you can do these externships while you're in school. The hospital system trains you during, say, one of your summers, and then they offer you a job at the end. So my externship at that time was in post cardiovascular, like open heart surgery for all these patients who've had open heart surgery. So I took care of them as a nursing student. And then at the end of that 3-month experience, they offered me a job on that floor. So it was one of the first exposures of like nursing jobs for me, but also because I just love like what other organ has to basically not skip a beat your entire life for 80 plus years. So it was just like it's a fascinating organ system. I think the nursing experience around it was really pushed me towards that.
Now, let me ask you, like, were you working, when you started working, were you working 12s, 8s? What was your work routine like?
Originally, that first job I had, which was bedside nursing, I did that for about 1.5 years, and that was all 8-hour shifts, 4 days a week. And I had ample amount of time off. Honestly, one of the things that I miss most about nursing is the flexible schedule. So I did 4/8 originally, and that was actually considered full time at that time.
Oh, wow. And you
Yeah,
said you did that for 1.5 years?
right.
Okay. What unit was that in? That was the open heart surgery unit?
Yes, post open heart surgery. So not ICU, just a step down from ICU.
So it was kind of like a step down. So basically step down progressive care
Yes,
unit.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. And why did you stop doing that and move on to something else?
So that was in Rochester, Minnesota. At that time, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, so I wanted to move back and be with my family. And at that time, that's kind of when the seed of medical school was planted in my head. So I wanted to be closer to family. I wanted to go back to school. I was still deciding, this was early on in that decision, so I was still deciding between like PA, NP, medical school. And so I came back to Tucson to do all of my prerequisites. And during that time, I wanted an even more flexible nursing job where I was doing 312s so that I had more time during the week so that I can take courses.
Wow. So even it was already 1.5 years into your nursing career and you were already thinking you wanted to go to medical school. Did you actually want to go to medical school even before you became a nurse?
So the decision happened over a lot of time. So it didn't happen right away at the 1.5 year mark. I just knew I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to go to graduate school. I just had to decide what path am I taking. As a nurse, you have a ton of options. So I could have gone PA, NP, or MD, but that was the main thing. I wanted the option with the most amount of options. And I felt like going to medical school opened the most doors for me. And now I'm trained to become a diagnostic radiologist. That door would have been closed if I hadn't gone to medical school.
Okay. Now, do you think that being a nurse in any way helped you in, or is going to help you in becoming a good doctor or being a good doctor?
Absolutely. I would say, for one, it helped me a lot in med school. When you go into med school, you do 2 years of didactics, which means you do 2 years of basically book studying, and you understand, you learn all the book stuff. You get lectures and you take exams. Then the last half of medical school, which is another additional 2 years, is clinical work. I think what helped me shine in those 2 years was my background in nursing. One of the stories that I love to tell is the first day of my trauma surgery rotation as a medical student. It was my first patient. The trauma was activated. We all ran down to the trauma bay. Nobody can get an IV line on this patient. Not a single person. The like EMS people who came through couldn't. And one of my jobs as a nurse was in the cardiovascular and radiology services, where I prepped and recovered patients for IR procedures and cath lab procedures. So they had a ton of bad vasculature, and I was doing tons of ultrasound IVs, like hundreds of them in my 3 years working in that. So I knew when that patient came in and nobody can get a line, I was like, oh, I can start an ultrasound IV on this patient. Like, so I'm over here as a third year med student on my first day of rotations, just let me try. And I remember the surgical resident saying, oh no, like you're just a med student. And I was like, well, I used to be a nurse. And she was like, you should have led with that. So yeah, so they let me start the IV, and I got it, and I was just like, gosh, I just think that having that my nursing background really just helps support that clinical aspect of medical school for sure.
Wow. Okay, I think you're going to convince a lot of nurses who are, very in doubt of like going into medical school that maybe their knowledge as nurses is going to be helpful to go into medical school.
Yeah, I don't think it's just, I mean, it's not just even the clinical skills. It's so much more than that. Nurses are able to navigate the hospital system. You know who to call when you need things. And then even just making those calls, being able to collaborate with other people within the healthcare system, we're used to it. You know, as nurses, we call residents, we call physicians like, hey, can you please put this order in for me?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that familiarity with making those calls, and it really just supports the resident, like my resident experience right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. So now let me ask you something because you said that you moved back with your parents and you wanted to take the classes that you needed to get into medical school. And then ultimately, once you got into medical school, it would actually help into your transition to becoming a resident. During this move, after you left, you said Rochester, Minnesota.
Right.
Okay. So after you left Rochester, Minnesota, you came here, you said that the thing that kind of held you back was that you didn't know how to approach this. Were there any people or any physicians that kind of impacted you in a way and they offered you the knowledge that you needed to, let's say, for example, enroll in the classes that you needed to enroll in, contact the people that you needed to contact to make those moves to put you in the right places? Was there anybody along the way that helped you make those decisions?
I would say there were like a team of like lots of people. It was never just one person. So one of the things that like seeded this idea in my head was that I was working with another nurse. She is one of my best friends. And from day one, she knew she wanted to go to medical school. At that time, it had never even crossed my mind. And I just thought, why would a nurse go through all of that training? And getting our BSN is already such a tough thing, you know? It's already very academically rigorous. And why would you go through all of that just to change course and now go through something even harder? So she planted that seed in my mind, and having her as a resource of just understanding what the pre-med prerequisite process was like was very helpful. So she was definitely one of my biggest resources, I would say. By the time I moved back to Tucson, Arizona, and I was working in the cath lab pre and prep area for 3 years, actually, I took pre-med courses over the course of 3 years. So most people don't do that. Most people do it over 1 year. And I took one course at a time each semester. I took my sweet time because I loved my nursing job. It was paying the bills. It was allowing me to have the flexibility to do these courses. And during that time, I networked with a ton of people. And this is something that like people don't maybe tap into as much. But I like anytime I heard like a resident walk by or a physician that is in leadership or who's a part of the admissions committee, I try to connect with these people. Like, can I shadow you? Can I, come to your clinic and just see what your workflow is like? I would email them and just to get to pick their brain about what their job is like. But I also did this with PAs and NPs just to make sure that I was covering all of my bases and not just so I could understand what all the roles were like and I can make an informed decision. I remember this NP that I shadowed. She worked in cardiology and she told me, she was like, Lily, if I was in your shoes, I would go to medical school. Like if I could turn back the clock, that's what I would do. And she felt like she was a perpetual resident physician. And I don't think everyone feels that way. And I don't want to undermine the NP role at all, but that made an impact on me. Like I am a person who's trying to go and shadow people to understand what all the roles are like. I did a rotation in cardiology as a resident and I ran into her and I was like, just so you know, 6 years ago, I shadowed you and you told me to go to medical school and now I'm done with medical school.
I love that. That is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So I want to know what kind of classes did you have to take and how did you enroll in the school that you ended up going to?
Yes, that is a great question, and I get that question a lot. So you can do it a multitude of ways. You can go to university, community college, or online. And I had to take about 6 or 7 additional courses beyond my bachelor's degree because a bachelor's in nursing is not going to cover your pre-med prerequisites. So I had to take general chemistry 1 and 2, organic chemistry 1 and 2, physics 1 and 2, and then biochemistry. So that's 7 courses I took, one at a time. And then you have to take the MCAT. Yes, so it's a lot. And I get this other question a lot, which is, should I become a nurse before I go to medical school? And it's such an existential question. Like, should you become a nurse? Well, you should become a nurse if you want to become a nurse, but I don't think people should just become a nurse so that they can go to medical school. 1, because we need good nurses who want to be good nurses. And 2, because it's not going to cover your pre-med prerequisites. Like, you will still need to get your bachelor's degree in nursing and then take an additional 6 to 7 pre-med prerequisites. Whereas if you just get a bachelor's in, say, biology or physiology, all of those pre-med prerequisites would be covered, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Are there any other questions that you get very often on your Instagram account related to your transition into the medical field?
A lot of people ask, can I still work as a nurse while I'm in medical school? And can you do, like, there are a lot of things, can you do it or should you do it kind of thing. So for me, I personally did not work. I value my free time. Most of us take out loans to go to medical school. So another question I get a lot is, how do you pay for it if you're not working? But there are people who are able to work because the nursing field is such a flexible field. You can pick up PRN shifts. I would say that that's easier in the first 2 years during your didactic years, where you're not working in the hospital 6 days a week. And yes, they make you do that when you're a medical student. So in the first 2 years, when you have weekends off, typically most med students are studying. But if you think that you could pull off working and studying, I think it's possible. Do I recommend it? No, because I don't think that you can be great at both. If you want to be a great nurse and be a great medical student, something has to sacrifice, and it might be your mental health. And that wasn't worth the sacrifice for me.
Yeah. So at this point, when you started medical school, first of all, you said it took how many years? 3 years to finish your prerequisites to get into medical school? Right?
Yes, and that was me personally, but I think that people can do it in a year if they do it full time.
Yeah. And I just want to go over the courses. You said you already had your BSN at this point, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you had to complete Chem 1, Chem 2, Organic Chem 1, Chem 2, and then Physics 1 and 2. What was the other class?
Biochemistry.
Biochemistry. So it was just not biochemistry 1 and 2. It was just biochemistry.
Right.
But that's a lot of science courses.
Yes, it's a lot of hard science courses. All of it is required because it prepares you to take the MCAT. And a lot of the basic sciences that you get taught during the first year of medical school requires this kind of foundational training and knowledge.
And so for people who don't know, what is the MCAT?
The MCAT is the entrance exam that is required for a majority of medical schools. So if you apply to MD schools, DO schools, usually they require this the MCAT to as an entrance exam.
Okay. Is there a cutoff point to where, like, if you get below that cutoff point, they don't accept you into medical school?
It will all depend on each medical school and each program. The program that I applied to, which is the University of Arizona, did not have a cutoff. They were a holistic medical school, and I really recommend most medical pre-meds look into applying to holistic schools just so that they don't just screen you out because of your GPA or MCAT score, and they look at you as a whole.
Wow, I didn't know about that. Are there a lot of schools like that, or they're pretty rare in the U.S.?
I think there are a lot of schools, and I think most of them are state schools. Mm-hmm. So like not the top 20 Ivy League schools in the US, but if you look at your state schools, like around near where I am, University of Arizona, the University of New Mexico, or like University of Nevada, places like that where it's like the state school, I feel it is more holistic than maybe more private schools or the top elite schools in the US.
Now, I have another question because I've seen some physicians who've gone to Puerto Rico to get their degree. Is there a difference between getting a degree in Puerto Rico and getting it in the continental US?
No. So, I mean, the difference is where you're getting it, right? So there are physicians who go and get a degree in a Caribbean school. I think that it's totally valid. The only thing is sometimes it's harder for you to match competitive specialties. Just statistics wise, that's just how it goes. Because you're not graduating from a US MD school. But I've known a ton of very successful residents who've graduated from Caribbean medical schools. The other thing to consider is I've not done it, so I don't know all of the information about Caribbean schools, but the other thing to consider is if you can or if you're allowed to take out loans for that. So it might be a little bit more difficult to take out federal loans to pay for a school that's not in the US. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but if people are considering that, they should definitely look into if they can take out loans.
Got it. All right. Okay. So you completed your prerequisites. You finished everything that you needed to get into medical school. How did you apply to medical? Sorry. How did you apply to your residency? Because actually prerequisites for medical school. Then you applied for medical school, right? Okay. When you applied to medical school, you said the first year was didactic, the first 2 years. And then the next 2 years were medical work. You actually had to show up to the facilities and practice hands-on. What kind of hands-on things were you doing while you were doing the medical portion of your program?
So what medical students do is typically we go in, we get assigned a patient, we take their history and physical, kind of ask them what brought them into the hospital and what caused their symptoms. Then we organize all of the information that we get from that and present their case to our attending physician, who's like our supervising physician. And we come up with an assessment and plan. Like, this is what the patient came in for. This is what their physical exam looks like. This is the kind of workup I want to do. And this is what I'm concerned for. This is the plan that I have. So that's part of what the third year medical school training is. Other things that we do that's kind of like different than what I experienced in nursing school is we scrub into surgeries. So during our surgical rotations, we're able to actually do surgeries and suture. We're able to start like central lines. We're shown how to do that. So a lot of it's gathering all the information from the patient and presenting that case to the attending. That's part of what the third and fourth year is. And you're also, while you're doing this, you're trying to decide what specialty you want to do as your career going forward.
Wow, I didn't know you guys could start central lines in medical school.
Yes, you
Wow.
can. Yep.
So we often get medical students in our facility. And, it's funny because the other day we had a medical student and she spent literally like an hour assessing our patient. Like, is that
Yes.
really how long you guys usually spend with the patient?
It can take that long, especially if you're really early on in your clinical training. And some of our write-ups for our history and physicals can be like multiple pages long. So yeah, she's gathering all the information, like going back into patients' history. Part of that's also just training how to communicate with patients. And I think it gets a lot shorter the more experience that you get. Because now as a resident, I mean, I'm carrying so many more patients now than I ever did as a medical student.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so you finished your medical school program. You ended up getting your degree, right? What
Yes.
kind of degree is it that you get?
Yes. So I got a medical degree. So
Okay,
a doctorate in medicine.
that's
That's
what it's
the
called.
MD, right?
Okay.
The MD. The other ways that you can become a physician is to get a doctorate in osteopathic medicine. So that's the DO. And it's essentially has the same scope of practice in the US. The only difference is DO physicians get trained in osteopathic, like manipulation of muscles and bones. I did not get trained on that, so I can't even speak to what that means. But we take a lot of the same or similar board exams, and we go through the same match process through residency to match into our specialties.
Okay. And is it easier to get a job as an MD versus a DO?
I would not say that it's easier or harder to get a job, like as an attending,
Mhm.
but DOs typically attract students who want to go into primary care. So family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, that type of specialty. Whereas like allopathic medicine, which is the MD, kind of attracts a more variety of specialties or people who are interested in different specialties.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you're right. I've seen mostly MDs working in like very specialized areas. So,
Right,
at
right.
what point did you decide that you wanted to go into radiology?
I decided pretty late. And it wasn't until my fourth year of medical school, and it came because I went into medical school with a very open mind. I wanted to experience all the specialties and see which one I would be most attracted to. And I actually thought that I was going to do psychiatry. I was gung ho on it. I did all these research projects. I did conferences, and it wasn't until my fourth year when I decided that I actually don't want to give up any part of medicine. Radiology is really all encompassing. I don't have to give up any demographic. I will be training in like pediatrics, OB, men, women, old, young. I don't have to give up any demographic because we image everybody. I get to learn for the rest of my life. Like radiology is going to continue to evolve. We'll get better imaging that maybe take less time. And then of course, we mentioned earlier, AI will only make my job easier and more efficient. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. It's a pretty competitive specialty, and I'm super excited that I matched.
Yeah. And it's funny because you mentioned that you basically did open heart surgeries and cardiology before because that was your passion, but now you're going into radiology, which is like this whole different spectrum of like medical specialty. So why did you not pursue cardiology and now instead you're
You
doing
know what's really funny?
Mhm.
I I didn't pursue cardiology, but cardiology is not off the table
uh
because in radiology there's also cardiovascular and thoracic imaging,
yeah.
and that includes like echocardiograms that we read, all the chest like cardiac MRIs. So that's another thing, right? Like I didn't have to give that up either. Radiology just encompasses like all of the body. I get to continue to learn all of it.
Yeah, I love that because it's just insane how many avenues you can pursue as a physician, right? Like it's
Absolutely.
just like wow. Now, what if you decided not to pursue your residency? Could you do anything with your degree as an MD?
I don't know if I know the best answer to that. I would have been really sad if I didn't match, but I think I remember when I was working. So I did a short stint as a research nurse in cardiology, and during that time, I worked with someone who didn't match, and so he worked as a research assistant for the year that he had. That was a gap year, basically. So I know that there are jobs out there that you can do, like you can do research assistant. I think you can go into industry if you wanted to be a consultant for maybe devices and drugs. But most of the time, these jobs really want you to have residency training. That's really where our knowledge flourishes. That's where we can really apply what we've learned in medical school. So I don't know a lot about
Yeah.
not going to residency.
And I forgot to ask you, there's a lot of people who are watching this who don't even know what you mean when you say you matched. Like, what does that mean?
Yes. So in your fourth year of medical school, all medical students have to apply for the match. And that just means you choose a specialty, you put your application into this centralized system, you apply and you select programs throughout the country that have positions. Once you do that, you submit it, everyone submits it by a certain date in September, and then you get interviews. And then once you do all your interviews, you do a rank list. You rank all of your interviews by where you want to go the most to maybe a less desirable place, but you still would love to go there if you match there. You submit this into this centralized computer. Who knows where it's actually going? And that computer does an algorithm of its own and matches you with the program. So the program has to rank all the people that they interviewed, and then you rank yours, and then however that matches and lines up is where you match at. And ideally, you want to have a lot of interviews so that you have a lot of options, and that ideally you match in maybe your top 5. That's the ideal situation. That all happens in March. So in March, everyone opens an envelope and it tells you where you matched. It's like a very special day for med students. It's even more special than our graduation day because that's like, did I get a job or not? And is it where I want to go?
Wow, what a process. That's
It is such a process.
it's got to be nerve-wracking too. Like you've worked your whole life to this point, right? Because once you match,
Absolutely.
that's it. At least now you can be a resident and finish your 3 to 4 years, whatever the case may be, and then you can
Yes.
practice as a physician.
Right. Exactly.
I'm sure you and your other classmates, when you were in your fourth year, you were all just waiting by the computer for this day to find out if you actually matched with the facilities that you wanted to get into, right?
Yes.
Were there other students who didn't match? And if so, what was that like?
Yes. So, I mean, every year there are a handful of students that don't match, unfortunately. Sometimes it has to do with just how competitive that specialty is. There isn't enough spots for how many people want to go into that specialty. And I mean, it's a sad day for those people. What ends up happening, though, is people could take research years. So you can continue kind of beefing up your residency applications. So say you want to go into a very competitive specialty, then you could do a research year and then reapply the next year. So a lot of people end up doing that. Some people just go into a preliminary spot. So it's basically an intern year that you can do until you reapply. So you match into 1 year of training instead of multiple years, and you just reapply to the next year. I know a lot of people end up doing that as well.
Now, what makes you a more competitive candidate in the matching process?
I think there are a lot of factors, but one of the important things are your board scores. So as medical students, you take step 1 and step 2. Those are just 2 different board exams that you take in your like second and third year of medical school. Step 1 is now pass fail. So it will just say pass on your transcripts. But step 2 now has a 3-digit score. So the higher, obviously, you can score on that, the better. Then they take into account your grades in clinicals. So we typically get graded on like a pass, fail, high pass, honors. So as many rotations you can honors in, the better. And then, of course, as med students, you want to do research. That helps a lot. You can get into extracurricular activities like volunteering or leadership. And then your application as a whole includes a personal statement. So writing a compelling personal statement also helps. All of that goes into the residency application to help see how competitive you are. And then letters of recommendation by people who are maybe important in the field.
Do you think your nursing background helped you match in your fourth
Yes,
year? Yes.
100%. Every single person in every interview I had in residency asked me about my nursing experience. All of them.
Wow.
It was always the hot topic that, yeah, everyone wanted to know about it. And I'm going into radiology. So I did some nursing in radiology because I prep patients for IR procedures. So I was able to really leverage that in all of my interviews.
Yeah, well, previously we talked about nurses who asked you, or people who asked you if going into nursing, then going into medical school would be a good idea. You just made it clear that it is a good idea because it's going to help you
Yes,
match.
it helps you match. It just makes you a more interesting candidate. And even now in residency, when I'm putting in orders, when I'm working on the medicine service, I'm putting in orders. I always think about the nurses. I'm like, am I timing this medication right for the nurses? Do I need to put all these patients on delirium precautions so that the nurses like don't have issues? Like I'm always trying to think about them and like how the orders will serve them just because of my background.
It must make you well, now you're a resident, right? But like when you're going to
Yes.
be a physician, I think you're going to be a physician that all the nurses are going to want to speak to, hang out with. You're going to be at a different level because I'm sure you probably experienced this before. Maybe you came across some rude physicians that kind of changed the way you felt about them. And you probably told yourself, I'm not going to be like that if I ever become a physician. For the most part, I work in the ER, so I work with a lot of cool physicians. But
Yes.
when I speak with nurses who work in the inpatient units, it's a whole different story. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to call the doctor. I don't know what they're going to think. And you probably thought about that on your way through this path. Like, I definitely don't want to be like one of these physicians that nurses don't want to speak with because they're too afraid to approach them.
Absolutely. I want to be best friends with the nurses. The nurses are at the bedside. I mean, they're the ones who can let me know if there's something going down with the patient. Yeah, I respect nurses so much. And part of what I'm learning too, there's an attending that I work with. Every time we round bedside, he wants the nurse there with us, speaking with the entire team. He wants to know what their concerns are, what their observations are, what their needs are. It's like clockwork. Every time we go into patient's room, the first question he asks is, where's the nurse? And he wants them bedside so that he can ask all those questions because the nurses have eyes on the patient. They're the ones that can let us know that if there's anything wrong, we can follow up on it.
Yeah, I love that. So what year into your residency are you in?
I'm in my first year. Radiology training is 5 years. So yeah. So it's 5 years, and typically radiologists do a fellowship. That's additional training after residency. So that's an additional 1 to 2 years. I knew this going in. I'm like a forever learner. I'm never gonna stop training, I feel like. So yeah, I'm in my first year out of 5.
Can you tell me why is it so much longer for radiology than the other specialties?
Well, we kind of touched on it earlier. Radiology is all encompassing.
Mm,
You and radiology don't have a lot of room for error because you are the person reading these imaging reports. If I'm reading all of these chest x-rays, like 100 x-rays in one shift, you want to be 100% right every time. And to get there, you need thousands and thousands of hours of training. So that's why it's so much longer. And we're not just reading chest x-rays. We're reading like CT scans for strokes. We're reading abdominal exams and people who've had multiple abdominal surgeries. So there's so much that you're covering. So the training is a little longer. And honestly, I'm glad that it is. I don't want to be like set free until I'm really comfortable reading images.
Now, let's go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. Do you think AI is going to play a role in how you guys, view your practice and how you actually perform in the field? Because the way that AI is advancing, it feels like it's just so fast. It's exponentially fast, right? But I think if you're thinking forward about how you can integrate AI into your technology, this is probably going to be a way for you guys to perform even better, I think. But do you think there's a maybe like a path in the future where AI can take some of the workload that you guys have away from you?
Absolutely. I think that it's already probably part of the process now. And I will say I'm not in my radiology training yet. I'm in my intern year, so I basically do rotations in everything but
Right.
radiology
Yes.
to get a very detailed clinical background before I get into my like advanced specialty training. But within radiology, a lot of what we do is dictation, which means voice to text. So everything that you're reading on the screen is dictated into a microphone, and then that writes out your report. So part of that, I think, will get easier and quicker as AI develops. And AI is already helping radiologists pinpoint things within imaging that is abnormal. So, like, look over here. This doesn't look normal. This might be a nodule. This might be a mass. But it's not perfect at that. It's not great. Like, that's why we still need radiologists to read. The other question I get a lot is, do I feel like AI is going to take over my job? I think it's just going to make the job a lot easier. In my career lifetime, hopefully the next like 50 years, I don't think it will take over my job. And if it does, I think there are a lot of other physician jobs that would be also threatened, including the ER, including family medicine, including anything that is image dependent, like pathology or dermatology, where people are looking at slides or imaging of microscopes. So if things are going to threaten radiology, I think it's also going to threaten a lot of other specialties as well. Like, I don't think it's only radiology dependent.
I really thought about this and thought about how our professions could be replaced by AI. But then I also thought it's going to be very, very difficult for that to happen and extremely challenging because so right now I'm working on an app, trying to develop an app, and I'm using a lot of AI like Claude AI and ChatGPT to write scripts for me. But the only reason I'm able to do that is because I've taken Python classes before. So I know the wording that I need to give and the prompts I need to give these AIs because I've studied some of it already. And, I'm working with a co-founder who doesn't understand it at all. So she doesn't know how to prompt the AI. So I feel like because you have studied this and you will complete like 7 years of training to get to know, like be very specialized in your area, you're the only one that's going to be able to work with AI to develop these
Right.
things anyway, right?
Exactly.
Because you can't
Exactly.
get somebody who graduated with an associate's degree to prompt AI or, like teach AI how to do these things.
Right. Right. I think there was a recent study actually that said Chat GPT or some type of AI is already out diagnosing doctors 2 to 1. That's an interesting study to me, and I believe it honestly. If we're feeding it information and it's telling us this is the most likely diagnosis, But AI is not going to be able to treat the patient the way that they need to be treated. Doctors, us as humans, need to bring our own humanistic touch and also look at the patient for who they are and not just some script that we're feeding into, chat GPT. We have to really look at the patient, what their background is, what their needs are, and give them treatment that a robot can't do.
I agree totally. Okay, so you said this is your first year. Okay, when you matched, how was that for you? I know it must have been accelerating when you actually found out that you were going to match into a program. Was it one of the programs that you definitely wanted to go to? Like, was that one of your top choices?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I was super excited. I'm actually moving out of Arizona next summer, and I'm excited to train in a new place. I feel like it'll help me just be a more varied and well-trained radiologist. And I'll be at a facility that's very well equipped and train me in a lot of different areas, including AI. They have a really robust AI program, and I'm very much looking forward to being a part of that.
So, how did you find out about their program? Do you get this information before they even accept you into it? Um, like,
Yes, yeah.
how did you? And let me go back. How do you even decide which programs you want to put in your preference list for the ones you want to match into?
Yes, that's a good question. So a lot of times people will start geographically and they'll
Mhm.
look like what are the programs in the areas that I want to live.
Yeah.
And then for me, since I'm applying radiology, radiology is a field that only has less than 25% women. So I knew I wanted to be in a program that have accepted women in the past so that I'm not the only female in my class, and also women in leadership. So I wanted to see that there were program directors that were female, just so I didn't feel so out of place. And then I wanted programs that had artificial intelligence training, like a robust program. I wanted to be in an academic center, so you can apply for academic centers or community centers. And I wanted to be at a university and be a part of. The other thing is global health. I wanted a program that had global health. So you have like this idea of check boxes for each program. You take that checkbox and you look at all the programs in the United States and you kind of pare it down from there.
Where did you get this list of programs from?
So you can Google it, honestly, but there are a lot of different websites. There's something called FRIDA. I don't even know, that's an acronym for something, but it helps you look at residencies based on all of these criteria. And I think it's like a paid program. I think you just have to pay, I don't think it's that much, maybe $50. And then you get access to all of this information.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when you find out that you've matched with a program, how long does it take for you to actually start your residency from the moment you get matched to the moment you start?
We match in March, and almost universally, everything starts July 1st. So July 1st, I don't know if you've heard, but sometimes it's like one of those days you don't want to show up in the hospital because like everybody's new. So July 1st is usually like the first day that interns end up on wards and do inpatient work. So July 1st.
So do you go up? Because right now you're a PGY1, right? Is that how it is?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So you're a PGY1 on July 1st. Do you become a PGY2?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And
Yes.
what is the difference between a PGY1 and a PGY2 besides the number of years that you've been doing it?
For me in my program, it would just mean that I'm done with my intern year. And it's really confusing for people who aren't in medicine. So I'm a PGY2 next year, but I'm an R1, which is my radiology year, my first year of radiology training, even though I'm done with my intern year. I know it's very confusing. So some people say if you matched into internal medicine, which is a 3-year residency, you're a PGY 1, 2, 3, and then you graduate and you're done.
Yeah.
Whereas since I'm going into radiology, I'm a PGY1 and PGY2, but I'm then an R1 because I still have 4 years of radiology training left.
Wow, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's complicated.
So the PGY1 is just basically just your intern year for
For
you.
me, yes.
For you. Okay.
Yes.
But if somebody were studying or practicing in, let's say, I don't know, to become a hospitalist, like a family medicine doctor, they would only
Hmm.
have 3 years, right? I think it's three
Yes.
years. Okay.
It's 3 years
But their first year is not an internship year. It's an actual like year of residency where they're
where they're
learning
in
the
their
things they're going to need
specialty.
in their
Yes.
specialty. I
Yes.
see. Wow. This is a lot.
I know. So there's only a few specialties that require this intern year, and they're advanced specialties. They're radiology, anesthesia, dermatology, ophthalmology. So these types of specialties require an intern year so that you have this varied clinical background, like strong in medicine first, and then you go into your advanced specialty, where that's the only thing you learn for the next 4 years or 3 years, however long that specialty takes.
This kind of reminds me of nursing school. When you're in nursing school, a lot of teachers tell you, "Hey, you need to go and study do med surg your first year or two, so
Yes.
you can get a generalized experience, and then you can go into your specialty areas." So that's kind
Yes.
of like what you're describing right now for nurses who want. And I recommend if you're a nurse and you want to go into whatever specialty it is, you don't have to do med surg. For most nurses, I'm telling you, just go straight into your specialty. But
I
it's
agree with that.
different, right? Okay. But it's
Yes.
different when it comes to going into your residency if you want to specialize into, you said radiology, anesthesia, ophthalmology. What was the other one?
Dermatology.
And dermatology. Yeah. And then what about why is cardiology not considered in that space?
Because cardiology is a medicine specialty. So you do 3 years of internal medicine, and then you do an additional 3 years of cardiology fellowship. And so it's 6 years total to become a cardiologist.
I see. So what
Right.
is the difference between a residency and a fellowship?
That's a good question. So residency trains you in a more broader aspect, where fellowship helps you subspecialize. So you can be a hospitalist with internal medicine 3 years, but if you want to subspecialize, say, just in cardiology, just in hematology oncology, you want to be an oncologist, just in ICU, you want to be an intensivist, then you subspecialize with a fellowship. But you can
Mm,
stay general if you want, with
I
just the
see.
first 3 years of residency.
So I guess it's almost like a nurse being in let's say MICU or like medical ICU, and then they want to go into neuro ICU, so they want to specialize specifically in neuro or
Sure.
cardiovascular or whatever. Just so many different specialties within the ICU. So that's kind of like what you
Exactly.
mean, right? Okay.
Right, right.
Um, okay. So all right. So you're gonna finish your first year internship, basically, quote unquote internship in July or March. Is it in March? Do you get a break in between?
No, no
Oh my
breaks.
gosh. Oh gosh. And I heard about the hours that you guys work. Is it really true?
Hmm.
Like you guys just work long, long hours? How
Yes,
many
it's
hours would you
true.
say per day or per week?
So it really depends on one, the specialty, and then two, the rotation you're on. I'm in an intern year that's called a transitional year. That's like a whole nother complicated layer of medical stuff. But basically, I rotate in a lot of different specialties. My heaviest hours month was in general surgery, and people who specialize in general surgery typically experience these type of hours where I was working up to like 80 to 90 hours per week. So you go into work every single day besides one day a week, and then you work about 12 to like 16 hours. It just depends on how the day goes. And you do that 6 days a week, and you get one day on average off every week on average. And if you get 2 days off in a row,
Mhm.
so like a normal person's weekend, it's called a golden weekend because you got 2 days off in a row. And that's right. That's typically a very coveted thing for people who are in general surgery. Now, when I was on my emergency medicine rotation, I only worked 14 shifts in the entire month, and each shift was 9 hours. So it
Wow.
just depends on what the rotation is. Some rotations are really heavy in hours, and some rotations, like right now, I'm on my research rotation, which means I'm putting in maybe a couple hours of work each day, and
Mm.
that's it. And I work
Wow.
from home for the whole month.
Well, you finally got a break.
Exactly, exactly. And then I was like, okay, I could do this podcast with you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you said when you were doing your surgery rotation, you were working, my gosh, like 80 to 90 hours. And I've interviewed nurses, and this is per week that you were working 80 to 90 hours. Did you even get any sleep in between?
So on average, I slept about 6 to 7 hours. So it wasn't that bad
Oh,
for me. Yeah.
wow. I'm
Hmm.
shocked. That is a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
But are you salaried this whole time, like while you're in your residency?
Yes, that's a great question. And I would love to talk more about money, honestly. So, yes, we're salaried. I make 67K per year. That's my salary. Doesn't matter how many hours I work. There are no bonuses in residency. So that's the money I make for this year. 67K.
Oh my goodness. So let me just, you know what? Let me just break this down because, but you know what? Your average, if you average your number of hours per week, right, throughout the entirety of your PGY one, how many hours would you say you typically work per week?
I'll say 55 to 65.
55 to 65. So let's just say, for example, you're working, you make 67,000 and you divide that. Do you get 4 weeks off in the year or none at
I
all?
do. I do
Okay.
get 4 weeks off.
Okay,
Yes.
so four divided by 48, and then divide that by, let's say, 55 hours. You're getting paid $25 an hour.
I don't like you doing that math. That makes me sad.
But I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's worth it. It's going to be worth it. You're putting yourself through all of this. But
Right.
there's been so much debate about this across the country for many decades now, where residents want to unionize. What do you think about that?
I don't know enough about it, but I know there are residents who have unionized in California and residents who are now making who are beyond like the 100K mark for per year, which I think when you balance it for the cost of living for some of these places, it balances out pretty well. But yeah, so there are unions who are fighting for better wages for residents. And yeah, it's a hard thing to discuss because we're still in training. So part of it is that we are still in training, but at the same time, we have under our belts a graduate degree, a medical degree. So that has to count for something. Yeah, I do feel like residents are mostly underpaid.
Yeah.
Once I start my radiology residency, my hours will actually decrease probably a little bit more than what I'm doing now. And I can do something called moonlighting and pick up shifts when I'm not working, or like say stay late on days that I'm working just a normal, 8 to 5. And we get paid an additional like $125 an hour for each moonlighting hour that we work. And I plan to do that to pay off student loans because one of the things with medical school is it comes with student loans. And the average student loan for medical students in the US is about 250K to 300K. And that's something to consider for any nurses who are going. Most of us take out medical student loans, federal government student loans. And I was lucky that I got a tuition scholarship from my school. So I only took out loans for living expenses. So my loan burden is not the average, it's about half the average. And I plan on paying down my loans by moonlighting in radiology residency.
Wow. Yeah, 250,000 to 300,000. I don't know if you know who Dave Ramsey is, but
Yes, yeah.
I saw this video of a gentleman who said that he was trying to get into medical school and he spent many years. He ended up getting a bachelor's in a prior area, like it was unrelated to medicine. And then he ended up getting some classes. I think he ended up getting another degree in biology or something similar to that. But he ended up incurring over $400,000 of student loans because of the schools he went to, right? So he said he couldn't get into a residency. He couldn't get into medical school. He was doing all these pre-med classes, taking his prerequisites, but he just couldn't do well enough in the MCAT to get into medical school. And he was asking Dave Ramsey what he should do. And Dave Ramsey said, "Well, you first of all, you need to sell everything. Like he always says, sell
Yes,
everything.
yeah.
Try to get a job in an area that's going to allow you to at least pay some of your debt down." And I commented on that video and I said, "Well, you could just get your nursing degree, I guess. Because you already have a bachelor's, you can just do an accelerated nursing degree and work as a travel nurse, or you can work at a higher paying hospital here in Northern California. Because like nurses here, some of them, like my wife, she makes $133 an hour." But like some nurses here, I
Amazing.
mean, yeah, right. Like nurses here in Northern California make a lot of money. You can just work up here, pay down all of that debt, and then you can just go back to school if you want to, right? Like you can go back to medical school because he's already taken all the classes he needs to take. He just needs to pass that test. So that's one option because that's a lot of money that he owes. $400,000 is nothing to joke at, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, a lot of people who are going to private medical schools who sometimes DO schools, they end up accruing these massive amounts of student loans. And my only thing with that is recommending that people, one, again, look into state schools. They typically will cost less, and look into schools that offer tuition scholarships, especially if your interest is to go into primary care like specialties. The school that I went to offered primary care scholarships to anyone who wanted to go into family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, and even general surgery. If you were to practice in Arizona after you finish medical school, they cover your tuition the entire 4 years. I didn't do that personally because I wanted to make sure my options stayed open, but it's an option for people. Like, people don't understand. Everyone always comes at me and says, like, why would you want to accrue that much debt? And they don't understand that there are scholarships that is available to medical students. You can get scholarships.
So are you going to stay in Arizona once you finish your fellowship?
I have a strong feeling I will end up here because all of my family is here.
Yeah.
So I would love to practice and be near them. Yeah.
I love that. And do you have any kids? Are you married? Anything like that?
I am married. I'm married to a musician. So he and we're going to go to Ohio. That's where I'm going to go for training. And then we'll end up back here. But we don't have kids. That's by choice. And we're not really envisioning children in our future, but that's just kind of where we are right now.
I do not blame you. So my wife and I, we have our daughter, she's 18. And we thought, as she was growing up, she became a teenager. We're like, oh my gosh, this is rough. We're like, we don't want to have any more kids. But lo and behold, COVID came along and we ended up having another kid. Now we have
You had a COVID baby.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The day we found out, we were literally on the floor crying, like crawling on the floor.
That is amazing.
But now that he's here, like, it's different. Where like every day that we see him, it just lights up our day. So it's different.
They bring joy.
Yes, absolutely. I would say once you have a kid, when you see them for the first time, it changes everything. It does. Because like we were like, no, we're never gonna have another kid. This is not gonna happen, and then it did.
Yes,
but
we have nieces and nephews, so we spend a lot of time with them.
That's it.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any pets?
Yes, we have a dog.
Okay, so man, that must be rough. Oh, but your partner, you said husband or boyfriend? Yes,
husband. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but he spends most of the time with the dog, I'm guessing.
Yeah, he does. Thank goodness, because I was always busy, and he's a big runner, so he runs our dog, and she's always tired. A tired dog is a happy dog.
Oh man. Okay, so I got so much information out of this. Oh, but I forgot to ask. You said you ended up getting scholarship, like a partial scholarship through your school for the program that you went into, and you incurred half of the typical debt that most nurses incur, right? And then your salary is about $67,000 per year. Is that enough for you to pay for your living expenses and just like your daily cost of living stuff? Is that enough for you?
Yes. So I have it written down because I wanted to like really give you all the information.
Yeah.
So my student loan debt, like the principal debt, is $113,000. So that's actually, I know that sounds like a lot.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's not for someone who went to medical school, because I got a $30,000 scholarship every year for tuition. Wow. And then I took out some student loans for the living part of it. And then now I make 67. So when my take home, I get paid every 2 weeks, is about $1,800. And that's after, so I fully fund my HSA. That's like a little shy of $300 every 2 weeks that goes into my HSA. And then I pay my medical insurance. I receive about $1,800 every 2 weeks. Within that $1,800, $750 of that I put into a shared account with my husband. So we both put in $750 into the shared account. That gets used for rent and all of our bills. So the rest that gets deposited into my account is like a little bit over $1,000. And I can do whatever I want with that. So that's about $2,000 of spending that I get each month that I can do whatever I want with. And I pay gas for my car, and I eat out, and any subscriptions that I have. And also I fund my Roth IRA. So I do 20% into the Roth IRA, and then the rest I can do whatever I want.
Wow. So let me ask you then, because you said before you get 4 weeks of time off every year. Is this that time of the year that you get those 4 weeks off?
So no, because I'm on my research rotation, which means I don't need to go into work and I'm able to work on a laptop. So that means I can work from anywhere. And
Ooh,
as long as I'm working on my case report from somewhere, I'm able to go without taking a vacation week during that.
very
I
good.
mean, I don't think that's typical for people,
Yeah.
but I can take a laptop with me and work as long as like I'm doing some logging some kind of hours while I'm vacationing. That's okay.
That is awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
me
you said it's not
too.
typical though. You said it's not typical.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, the way that you guys manage your finances, I really love that because you said you have a shared account where you guys both deposit money into, and that goes for like rent and anything related to your living expenses. And then the other half you get to keep for yourself, which is really
Right.
cool. You put that in your personal account. What is going to happen though when your salary goes way up after you finish your residency and your fellowship?
Yes. So I haven't thought that far because honestly, I came from a very low income upbringing and I've never, like, the amount of money that I'm going to make as a radiologist is kind of beyond what I can ever even imagine. I'm probably going to have to get a financial advisor to help me deal with that amount of money. I think that if we're very smart about it and invest most of it, that I can honestly like retire as early as I want to. I'm just not sure what that's going to look like. I'm excited for it, but I think it's going to be kind of far beyond what I can imagine. Honestly, like the offers that the residents are getting, like the senior residents are getting, are in the 500,000 range for per year. But people who partner and are in private practice can make up to $1 million per year, which is it's mind-boggling to me. I don't know how to wrap my head around that kind of amount, and how I would deal with that. Honestly,
Uh, I mean, I'm sure you're looking forward to it though.
right? Exactly. Yes.
Like, because I mean, think about it. You've been in school for so long, and
Right.
you still have what, 6 more years to go, or 5 more
Yes.
years to go?
It's far. It's
Yeah.
far in the future. It's obviously like that can't be your only driving point. You have
Yes.
to be driven by other things and be really fulfilled by what you're learning. But that is a great like cherry on top for
Yeah.
sure.
Absolutely. So now, for anybody who's watching this video, and I'm telling you, I've gotten so many nurses over the years who want to know what the path looks like. You have all of the information. If they want to reach out to you, how would they go about doing that?
Absolutely. I love it when people reach out to me about this. So you can find me on Instagram at nursemdlily. And I started a YouTube channel at the beginning of med school. I haven't really posted on it consistently, but I'm also Nurse MD Lily on YouTube. But my Instagram is where I'm most active. And I actually, during July of my intern year, I started writing an ebook guide for RNs to become MDs. Part of the reason why was because when I started that YouTube channel, I got so many DMs, so many people asking me how to do this. And I answered as many questions as I could over the years, and I've collected so many answers, and now I just put it all into one document. Within that document, I share all of my own personal timeline. I share my scores, my transcripts, and that guide has helped a lot of people. And it's actually part of almost like a financial side hustle that's helped me in this first part of intern year that I did not mean to make a side hustle. Honestly, I just wanted a document, an informational document that just happened to be really successful. So they can find that as well, linked in my bio on my Instagram. And I hope that that would help people. I think it's helped a lot of people already. You can read the reviews on it if you need a little more reassurance.
If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click here to watch my interview with a psychiatric nurse practitioner who made over $600,000 last year.